Hello. Today I'd like to talk to you about Hosea, one of my favorite minor prophets in the Bible, and the unbelievably tough job that God called him to do. Now, first of all, the name Hosea in Hebrew means salvation, and this whole story is a message of the redemptive qualities that God has for us and a full picture of salvation. It shows us that God is committed to his people. And it shows us that he is faithful even when we're not. So in the first chapter of Hosea, God said, go take yourself a wife and a children of harlotry, because the land has committed great harlotry by departing from the Lord. Ooh, it's rough. But it means adoption into the kingdom. While Christ died while we were still sinners. Like, he came for the sinner, and we don't deserve the inheritance, but he has given us an option to be heirs to the throne, to be adopted into the kingdom. So for his first three kids that it talks about, even their names give a picture of their story. Okay, the first one, it says, was named Jezreel, which means God will sow. And this means that God had had enough. He was going to bring an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And the next kid was named Lo-Ruhamah. And that means not loved or not pitied, meaning God was done with how they had been treated. Okay? So he was over it, and he was going to depart from them. Well, the last kid was named Lo-Ami, and that means not my people. God was saying, you are not my people, I am not your God. It's pretty rough. Now, the house of Judah would be saved. It's important to remember that. But all throughout this story, he was also, this woman's name was Gomer, and no matter that she was a hooker or not and unfaithful, he would go buy her back when she left him. He would go take her back even when she was unfaithful. And this is a perfect example of God's love for his church, because the reality is, just like harlotry was punishable by death, as Leviticus says, the sins we've done are death-worthy, but Christ died on the cross to redeem us from death, and to save us from the path that we were headed down. It's pretty awesome to think about it. There's a lot of verses throughout that paint the picture. In Hosea 4:6, it says, my people will be destroyed for lack of knowledge. Now, it's important to remember that this didn't just happen out of the blue. We got to look back and look at what Israel was actually doing. King Jeroboam had set up a counterfeit system of worship for Yahweh, which is interesting because they had strayed for a long time. This is just the prophet where God called him back to him. But every time that we decide to stray from the Lord, it's easy for Satan to sneak in and give us a counterfeit to worship. Whether that's someone looking at a statue or a rock and worshiping it, or a piece of jewelry with a deity on it, or a crystal ball, or tarot cards. When we stray from the Lord, it makes it easier for Satan to make a play on our lives. Now, in chapter 6, the Lord says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. It's more important to have the knowledge of God than burnt offerings. And this alludes actually to Matthew 23, when Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and he said, you do well to tithe, but you forget the important things, justice and mercy. Now, you got to remember, with the Bible, the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. They play off perfectly off each other. And in chapter 7, it says, the thief cometh in, their own princes spoil them. Well, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. In chapter 10, verse 1, it says, Israel empties his vine. He brings forth fruit for himself. What does that tie into? 1 Timothy 6. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Now, it's important to remember that even though Israel was straying, this is a big picture of how one person can make a difference. Just like Moses saved Israel by pleading with the Lord. Well, the same kind of thing happened here with Hosea. And it's important to remember that God chooses a remnant a lot of the time. So if you ever think that one person can't make a difference, the Bible would say differently in many spots. The remnant is important. A lot of times someone has to step up, like Hosea, like Esther, to save God's people. You are very important, and your mission is very important to the Lord. Now, we can look a little farther, and in chapter 12, it says, "Return to your God, observe kindness and justice, wait for your God continuously." Only God can redeem and restore. This stubbornness, this pride, this arrogance, it gives us distance from the Lord. But the reality is that He wants to save us. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. The God then is the same God now. He's ready to forgive. He wants His people to come back from Him, but sometimes it takes punishment in order to shake them out of their idolatry. Now, looking back to chapter 2, this is a sign that hidden sin will be exposed. It also talks about in chapter 7 that secret sins break God's heart. They really do. We need to be open. We need to be repentant. And we need to come to Him asking for forgiveness in spots. I want to read you a verse from chapter 14. That is, "Whoever is wise, let him understand these things. Whoever is discerning, let him know them. For the ways of the Lord are right. The righteous will walk in them, but transgressors will stumble in them." God is faithful. He is good. And He is loving. And He loves us in a way that's impossible for us to fathom. It's an amazing story across the board of someone called to do something very hard. Can you imagine if you were called to marry a whore in order to make a point for your country? It's a rough spot. Rough spot. That's why Hosea had a pretty tough battle, but he followed through.